G'day, Geoff Lewis here from Seriously Series, and welcome to another episode in servicing your 4x4. Today what we're going to be doing is something very, very special, and many of us may never ever have to do it, but if we do come to that point, we want to know how we need to go about it. What is it? Well, it's very simple. I'm going to be taking the motor out of the Series 3 Land Rover here, and I'm going to be putting a brand new motor or a wonderfully restored and overhauled motor into it with a few interesting modifications along the way. So if this sounds like a video that's of interest to you, then you know what to do. Stay tuned. Rightio, so I finally got the Series 3 in the shed. Previous videos you may have noticed the Series 2 usually resides here. I've taken the roof rack off the Series 3 and I'm finally ready to undertake the epic, adventure of taking the motor out of the Series 3. Now, just as a bit of an intro, yes, we're going to take the motor out, as I said. We're also going to take the gearbox and transfer case out also. Now, the reason why I'm going to do that is there is a seal between the gearbox and transfer case that I attempted to replace with the gearbox in situ, so in the vehicle. And I thought I did an okay job, but I'm not 100% happy with it. So I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to do it all over again, because this vehicle, as of 2021, is going on a massive remote outback, jaunt, or to use the term again, adventure. And I really don't want to have to worry about that seal not really being up to par. Because if the seal isn't, then obviously fluid from the transfer case or oil is going to get pumped into the gearbox, and I'm just going to have to take so much more gear oil than I actually need to. So I don't want that to happen. So that's why we're going to do that. Now, in order to pull the motor out and put a new motor in, it's obviously not going to fit into this one episode. And if I did do it as one episode, it'd probably be over 6 hours. And I think many of you would probably fall asleep after a couple hours. So I don't think that's entirely fair. So what we're going to do today is I'm just going to show you everything that I like to do before tackling a big project like this. I think these are skills, and they are a certain mindset that's actually very important to sort of get into before tackling a project. Many of us know of individuals out there, and maybe we've been one of them in the past. I know I have, and we've gone into a project and we've thought, we're going to do it, we're going to have all these high dreams and expectations of what it will be, but sadly we don't even get halfway there. So I think one of the most important things is getting yourself mentally ready, being realistic, and obviously making sure that you're well prepared. So let's get into it, and I'll run through a little bit about the preparation, and then we'll actually start pulling stuff apart. That's the fun part. Rightio, so many of you may think that I'm sort of teaching you how to suck eggs, and I do apologise for that. If you already know this, then just sit back and relax and have a sip of that cup of tea or something slightly stronger. I won't bore you for too long, but knowledge is one of those things that we're not born with, we acquire it over time. So I'm just going to bestow a bit of knowledge on you here, because I've learnt this over the years through a lot of heartache, trial and error, I guess you could say. So before tackling a project, particularly on a Series Land Rover, what I like to do is obviously first, if I'm unsure of what I'm doing, consult the workshop manual. It is the Bible. go through exactly what you're planning to do. So let's use an example. Let's say we're going to do an oil change. Okay, so we go through and we have a look at what we need. Well, we're going to need some oil, aren't we? Yep. We're going to need probably a copper washer or fibro or fibre washer for the bung that we're going to take out, aren't we? Yep. And are we going to need a filter to replace the old one because it's a bit dirty and manky? Yep. So what does that mean? Well, it means we've got a shopping list of items that we need to get before we actually do the service. Now, as I said, this seems like I'm teaching you how to suck eggs, and I do apologise, but it's very, very important. If you go underneath the vehicle and you uncrack that bung and you drain all the oil out, and then you find out that you can't get the correct oil, you can't get the correct washer, and you can't get the correct filter, it's been a waste of time, hasn't it? And then your vehicle's got to sit there with no oil in its engine for probably 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, depending on how difficult it is to actually get those parts. So what I do, as I said, I look at the workshop manual, consult that, and then the next thing I get into is this. And this is the best thing that you can get for your Series Land Rover. Now, what is it? It is a parts catalogue for a Land Rover Series 3. They do one for the Series 2 and 2A, and they do one for the Series 1 Land Rover 2. And this is just a fantastic book. It's got absolutely everything in it that you could possibly ever need to know about a Series Land Rover. And it's incredible what you can get. You can get bolts, studs, all your gaskets, individual part numbers for each one. And so it means that when you actually call up a Land Rover parts specialist, instead of doing some kind of charades over the phone saying, oh no, it's that bolt that's kind of down the bottom of the left centre kind of thingamajig doodah there, you can actually just quote the part number and they'll go, oh yep, we've got one of those, we've got a Land Rover parts catalogue at hand, which they all do, and if you quote that number, minute, 2 minutes later, they've got the part, or they can put the part on order for you. Piece of cake. No frustration, no humiliation. Fantastic. So I go through this and I actually look at all the different parts that are actually in the component that I'm looking at replacing. So in regards to the engine, I've gone through this. I've got water pump gaskets. I've got studs for the bell housing. I've made sure I've got a new oil filter because I was down on oil filters. Capacitor, points, ignition leads. What else? Thermostat and temperature sensor. All this kind of stuff. And it means that you can have a really comprehensive list of what you actually need in order to complete that task. And it means 9 times out of 10 you'll pretty much have everything you need. There'll be 1 or 2 things that you'll miss, but look, we're not perfect and we're all human. So that's what happens, but it improves your chances. So anyway, enough of that, but I really can't recommend it enough. Get yourself one of these. They're not hard to find on Dr. Google. Just type in Land Rover Series 3 parts catalogue, or 2 or 1, and I believe you can even download a PDF version of this, but as many of you know, I'm not much of a fan of them. I prefer to kill a tree or 2 and then have it for life. So it's the way to go. So it's really good. The other thing about it, and I'll finish up here because I don't want to prattle on too long, but you've got these wonderful exploded diagrams. And let's face facts. You've got to the end of a project and you've got all these decoration bolts, all these extra bolts lying on the bench, and you have no idea where they go. That's where having an exploded parts diagram, I guess you could say, is absolutely vital, because you can go through and you can actually pick and choose where it should actually go. So if you get stuck along the way and you haven't taken enough photos, so you get out a jail free card. So anyway, I'll put that to the side, and yeah, we'll start ripping the Series 3 apart. Fun times. Like that. Rightio, so just a bit of an update. A few hours have passed and obviously progress has been made. I left you earlier, obviously, with myself removing the battery. Got that on charge at the moment. And what I've done is a bit of an assessment of the engine. I've basically gone round and looked at all the wires, all the electrics that are actually connected to the engine, and obviously any hoses and that too, which are obviously connected to the engine and then connected onto components that are bolted to the body. Now, this is something that's pretty easily done here on a Series Land Rover, but on a more modern four-wheel drive, this is absolutely critical, because it's amazing how many wires, electrodes and other fancy gizmos and gadgets there are. But luckily, it is KISS here. Keep it simple, stupid. So let's dive into the engine bay and I'll show you what I've done. Rightio. So the passenger side, which is the left-hand side of the vehicle, is really where all the action happens. Here, generally, you've got the inlet manifold and obviously your exhaust manifold. But I have fitted extractors to the Series 3. So in order to get the motor out, I had to take the inlet manifold off to take the extractors off. And so I've done that. So now we've got a nice clear berth on this side. I've now got to take the electrical, or the positive terminal and negative terminal, off the starter motor. So then this side of the engine is pretty much done. Top radiator hose is off, heater hoses are off too, as you can see on the heater box there. Moving over to this side, batteries removed, as I said I would do earlier, so man of my word. And then obviously I've disconnected the wires that were actually on the coil to the distributor, because we don't want obviously to pull the distributor out inadvertently. I've disconnected the fuel line to the, obviously to the fuel pump, to the carburetor, and I've pulled that out. The next job I've got to do is obviously pull the fuel line out to the fuel tank. We've then got the hydraulic line here, which is this one here, that goes all the way down to the slave cylinder on the transmission, so that's going to have to come out also. Now, once I've done that and I've disconnected the bottom radiator hose and got the radiator out, because obviously we're going to have to move the whole engine that way to then be able to pull it out of the engine bay. The reason being is the bell housing is obviously behind the actual firewall, or the bulkhead here. So we've got to pull it probably about that far forward in order for the engine to then go up. So we've got a bit more work to do. Now, in order to do that, you can do it with the motor in the engine bay as is, but it becomes very tiresome and rather difficult. And because I'm going to pull the gearbox out anyway, I'm going to take the floor plates out inside the vehicle and the transmission tunnel, and then I can get much easier access. I can actually get in there with a rattle gun and actually just take them off a piece of cake. So it'll probably take half hour in order to do that. The reason being it doesn't take that long is because I've done it all before. I haven't taken the motor out of this vehicle, but I've fitted all the floor plates and I've taken them out on multiple occasions. So that's sort of the next step that we've got to go here in order to get the motor out. But any progress is good progress. And one bit of information, or a pearl of wisdom I would give you, is if you are going to be doing a project like this, make sure you give yourself plenty of time. You want to enjoy the process. You don't want to be rushing. So anyway, I better get stuck back into it, and we'll catch you guys later on.
So what is the bolt connecting? What's the bolt?
So we have success.
We have clearance, that's for sure.
Yeah, now what we've got to do is we've got to get it over here.
So if you hit that side and I'll hit this side.
And then where is it going to land?
I'll move it back. So I'll move some of this stuff out of the way. I'll move it back here.
The old one next to the new one.
That's it. Let's see some parts of it.
Well done.
Rightio, so cheers. So we've got the motor out. What an achievement. I admit I got a little bit carried away there, and I did say I was going to give you a bit of an update before I pulled it out, but when you're on a roll you really don't want to stop, so I'll have to try and do better in the future. A couple of things that I needed to do to get the motor out was actually remove the bracket for the engine mount on the left hand side. The reason why I wanted to do that is I needed to keep the engine level and to actually be able to pull it out. If you lift the motor up over the top of the actual engine mount itself, then you're going to find the engine's going to be on a slight angle, and you've got all the weight of the gearbox and transmission on your studs, so it's going to be very difficult pulling it out. You want it level, and you want to just take up the slack, or just take up the strain and the weight, and then you can pull it forward. So that's what I've done. A couple of things that also caught me out was the fact that this vehicle's fitted with an oil pressure gauge, or oil pressure sensor, whatever you want to call it. And that's actually at the top of the oil filter housing. So you need to make sure that you disconnect that. You just need a 1/2 inch spanner to actually get on the fitting. Now, the other thing that you need to be mindful of too with the Series 3, as opposed to the Series 2, is that your clutch slave cylinder is actually on the left hand side of the vehicle. There's a steel brake line, or a steel hydraulic line I should say, that actually runs from the slave cylinder up to the flexible rubber hose that then goes onto the line that goes to the clutch master cylinder. So you need to make sure that that's actually disconnected off the bell housing. There's a couple clips there, but the rubber that was actually in between the clip and the hose itself was so badly perished, I ended up just getting rid of it entirely and just taking the bolt off and the clip and everything too. So it's important to do that. The other thing I would really suggest is getting some help. These engines are cumbersome things to get out, and you simply can't be watching every single bit of it as you pull it out. You know, this is I guess a pretty old vehicle for some people, and there's not too many wires, but on a modern vehicle you could easily snag a wire and rip it off, and it wouldn't be a hard thing to do. But anyway, this leaves us at the end of this episode of servicing your 4x4. What we'll be looking at doing in the next episode is an engine overhaul. And no, I'm not going to be rebuilding the engine, as the new engine's already rebuilt. What I'm going to be doing is fitting a number of components to it. I'm going to be fitting a distributor, inlet manifold, clutch, and a number of other things. And I'll be giving you some tips and tricks on what you need to do for prepping your engine before you start it for the first time. And also we'll be looking at engine condition and engine storage, because I'll be storing the old motor for either a future project or to sell with the vehicle if and when that time comes. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you are enjoying the content here at Seriously Series, then please do consider supporting us via Patreon by clicking on the Patreon icon at the top right hand corner of your screen. And if that isn't your cup of tea, you can support us via our website through PayPal by clicking on the web link in the content section down below for seriouslyseries.com.au. And if you're new to the channel and you're just trying to figure out who we are, what we do and all the rest, then please be sure to click on that subscribe button, click on the notification button too, and that way you're not going to miss out on one single video. Anyway, I hope to see you in our next video, and I'll catch you then.